Ancient Pagans and Samhain, Episode 1, the Celtic Samhain, the fire of the dead and the living. The summer's breath is gone. The fields lie silent, and the hearth between the worlds, the veil trembles. The turning of the year. To the ancient Celts, Samhain marked not just the end of harvest, but the end of the year itself. The light half had waned, and the dark half began. Crops were gathered, animals brought in, and the people stood at the edge of the unknown, the liminal space between seasons, between life and death. Time lost its meaning on Samhain night. It was said that the walls between worlds grew thin, allowing the Aos sea, the fairy host and spirits of the dead, to wander freely among the living. This was not a night of terror, but of deep reverence. Fires were lit high on the hills, so that every hearth might catch their flame, symbol of renewal, protection, and remembrance. In Ireland, at Tlachga and Tara, great communal bonfires burned. Each household extinguished its hearth before sunset, only to rekindle it from the sacred blaze. This act joined every soul in one eternal flame, a covenant of kinship between the living and the dead. Offerings were cast into the fire, grains, bones, milk and ale. It was said that spirits could see the smoke and find their way home. Even the gods walked unseen. The Dagda, mighty and generous, was believed to roam the land seeking hospitality before winter's hold. Feast of the Ancestors. Tables were laid with an empty seat for the departed, a candle burning in the window to guide them. Food was left by the door for wandering souls and hidden folk alike. To ignore them was folly, to honour them was wisdom. Divination thrived on this night. Apples were peeled and tossed to reveal initials of future loves. Nuts cracked in the fire foretold who would stay true. The veil was thin, and so was the patience of spirits. Thus laughter, music, and shared bread kept the living grounded. Herbs and the spirits. Many herbs were burned or hung for protection. Mugwort, to guard the threshold between realms. Rowan berries tied with red thread to repel ill will. Juniper and hazel for clear sight in the mists. It was a night of herbal smoke and ancestral whispers, a time when the healer's art mingled with the unseen. The inner fire. Samhain was not only the death of the light, but its preservation within. Each person carried the spark of renewal into the cold months. They faced the long dark knowing that death was only a doorway, not an end, but a return. As the last embers faded, silence fell, and in that silence hearts remembered. We are the sum of those who came before and the promise of those yet to be. The Norse Helblót, a feast for the departed. Frost veils the field, the ravens cry from empty trees. Winter comes, and with it, remembrance. The coming of Helblót. As the nights lengthened and the winds grew sharp, the Norse people gathered for Helblót, the sacrifice or feast to Hel, goddess of the Underworld. It was held in late autumn or early winter, a time when the boundary between the living and the dead blurred, much like the Celtic Samhain. To them, death was not a thing of horror, but a part of the eternal cycle. The souls returned to the hidden world, awaiting renewal. Those who had lived with honour joined Odin in Valhalla, those of gentler fates dwelled in Folkvanger with Freyja, and all others found rest in Hel's realm, quiet, cold and deep. The Feast of Shadows. Families set the blot table for ancestors and gods alike. Bowls of porridge, beer, bread and meat offered with care. At the hearth they raised the horn of remembrance, calling upon those who had passed to share the warmth of the living once more. The old sagas speak of nights when the Draugr, the restless dead, wandered from their mounds, drawn by the scent of smoke and sacrifice. Thus fires burned bright and doors were barred, not from fear but from respect, for the unseen were powerful and easily stirred. The gods of the dark season. At the heart of Helblót stood Hel, half pale as a corpse, half black as night, ruler of the underworld, daughter of Loki, and keeper of all forgotten souls. She was feared and honoured alike, for she guarded the peace of the dead. Alongside her, Odin walked the cold paths, Ygr the gallows lord, seeker of wisdom in the realm of the dead. Freyja, too, received half the battle slain, her tears of gold mourning the endless cycle of loss. In their stories, death was sacred, a teacher, not a punishment. Smoke, blood and memory. The Norse made offerings both symbolic and real. Juniper and pine burned in the fire, purifying the space. Ale and mead were poured to the earth in honor of the fallen. Black wool and bones were sometimes laid upon the altar for Hel as tokens of remembrance. Those who walked the old ways whispered charms for courage, for calm in darkness, and for protection from wandering spirits. It was said that Hel heard every word, though she spoke only in dreams. The silence of snow. As the feast waned, they sang low songs, not of grief, but of endurance. They believed that every ancestor's strength flowed through their blood, lending courage for the long winter ahead. Death, in their eyes, was merely a season, and like winter it would pass. Open quote, light the fire, pour the mead, whisper the names that time forgot, for they walk beside us still, unseen, yet never gone. The Roman Lemuria and Feralia, ghost festivals of old Rome. In the hush of midnight streets, a door creaks open, a man walks barefoot whispering, not to the living. Restless dead of Rome. Long before All Hallows or Samhain's shadow reached their empire, the Romans had their own nights of remembrance. They called them the Lemuria and the Feralia, festivals for the Mains, benevolent ancestral spirits, and the Lemures, unquiet ghosts. Each year in May, and again in late October, the veil trembled. To the Roman mind, death was orderly, yet even order has cracks. If the rites of burial were neglected, a soul might wander, becoming a lemur, a pale shade that haunted the night. Thus these festivals were both acts of devotion and of defence to calm the dead and keep harmony between worlds. The Lemuria, a midnight ritual. At the stroke of midnight, the head of the household rose in silence. Barefoot, he washed his hands in spring water, then stepped into the moonlight to perform the ancient charm of expulsion. Holding a handful of black beans, he cast them behind him, one by one, saying softly, "With these beans I redeem me and mine." 9 times he repeated it, never looking back, for it was believed the shades would follow, gathering the beans as offerings of peace. At last he struck bronze and cried out 9 times, "Ghosts of my fathers, depart." And so the restless were appeased, soothed by ritual, driven from the threshold till dawn.
The Feralia!
A feast for the ancestors. While the Lemuria was secretive, the Feralia was open, communal and mournful. It marked the close of Parentalia, 9 days of offerings to the dead, ending on February 21st, when families gathered in cemeteries, carrying wine, garlands and bread soaked in salt. Women wept openly at tombs, men poured libations upon the earth. It was a festival of reconciliation with mortality, not fear, for they believed that neglecting the dead invited misfortune, while honouring them secured peace for the living. The poet Ovid wrote of these rites with reverence, warning, "Let not the silent dead be forgotten, lest their wrath awaken." Ritual fragrance and herb lore. Though not all sources record it, herbs and smoke were ever present in Roman rites. Myrrh and frankincense burned for purification and remembrance. Rosemary, sacred to memory, was laid upon tombs. Cypress branches, symbols of mourning, adorned every graveyard gate. The air was thick with the scent of passing, bittersweet and sacred. Every curl of smoke rose as a bridge between the worlds, The Romans understood that to live is to coexist with the unseen. Their ghost festivals echoed the same truth the Celts and Norse held dear, that death is not departure, only transformation. When dawn returned, the homes were swept, the doors sealed with chalk, and offerings removed. Peace was restored, the boundaries redrawn. Hail to the ancestors, keepers of silence. May your rest be deep and your memory eternal. The Greek descent, Persephone's return to the Underworld. When the pomegranates ripen, the earth grows still. A mother weeps and a daughter walks among shadows. The descent begins. In ancient Greece, autumn marked the Eleusinian mysteries, the most sacred rites of Demeter and Persephone. These were not festivals of death, but of transformation and renewal, mirroring the cycle of grain that dies in the earth only to rise again in spring. As the fields turned gold, initiates gathered at Eleusis bearing torches and secret prayers. They walked the sacred road from Athens, honouring the journey of Persephone, the maiden who descends and the queen who returns. The myth of Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of grain, was taken by Hades, ruler of the underworld. When the earth opened and swallowed her, the world above fell into mourning. Demeter wandered in grief, leaving the soil barren and the fields lifeless. Yet Persephone was not lost. She was transformed. In the realm of shadow, she learned the mysteries of life and death, becoming queen of the underworld, beloved by both gods and ghosts. When she returned each spring, the earth bloomed anew. Thus the Greeks saw in her myth the eternal rhythm, descent, silence, and rebirth. The Eleusinian mysteries. During these secret rites, no words of the ceremony were ever revealed, yet we know their heart. At their core lay a promise that just as Persephone rose from darkness, so too might the human soul transcend death. Torches were carried in the night to guide the way, symbolizing inner illumination through the shadow. The initiates fasted, drank the kykeon, a sacred barley brew, and beheld a vision said to free them from the fear of death. It was the Greek SAMHEIN, a sacred threshold between the seen and unseen, where mortality was not a curse but a pathway to understanding. Sacred offerings and symbols. Each element of the myth bore ritual meaning. Pomegranate seeds, blood of the earth, symbol of binding and return. Barley, Demeter's gift, life through sacrifice. Torches, the soul's light in darkness. Narcissus flowers, beauty that lures one to transformation. Incense of myrtle, storax, and honeyed wine was offered to the underworld gods. The scent was both sweet and sorrowful, a bridge between Demeter's grief and Persephone's sovereignty. Lessons of descent. In Persephone's journey lies a truth older than words, that every harvest must die, every soul must rest, and every ending hides a seed. To descend is not to be lost, it is to be remade. As the ancients whispered in Eleusis, "Blessed is she who has seen these mysteries, for she knows that death is not the end." And when the torches dimmed and the autumn wind carried the scent of ripe pomegranates, they knew the goddess walked again below, her absence the price of spring's return. The Egyptian passage, the weighing of the heart. In the chamber of silence, a single feather drifts. The soul stands bare before eternity, trembling yet unafraid. The horizon of the dead. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end, but a crossing. They called the realm beyond life the Duat, a vast shimmering mirror of the world above, filled with rivers, stars, and guardians of light and shadow. When the body was laid to rest, the Ba spirit took flight at dawn, guided by prayers and spells carved upon papyrus, the Book of the Dead, or as they named it, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Every soul, rich or poor, embarked on the same perilous voyage toward the Hall of Mart, where truth would decide their fate. Hall of Two Truths. Here stood Osiris, green-skinned lord of the dead, seated upon his throne of gold and lapis. Before him, the goddess Ma'at, embodiment of divine order, held her sacred feather of truth. The heart of the deceased, believed to carry every thought and deed, was placed upon a great scale. On the other side lay the feather. If the heart weighed lighter, the soul was pure and free to enter the eternal fields of peace. If heavier, burdened by lies and cruelty, it was devoured by Amit, the eater of the dead, part lion, crocodile, and hippopotamus. The final oblivion. This judgment was not vengeance, but balance, the return of all things to harmony. The path of Ma'at. To live in Ma'at was the Egyptians' truest aim, to walk with honesty, compassion, and reverence for the gods. The righteous soul, passing the trial, was welcomed into Aru, the field of reeds, an eternal dawn where crops grew tall, waters shimmered, and family and ancestors awaited reunion. There the soul lived again, tending the divine harvest in the sunlight of Osiris. The funeral rites of Egypt were elaborate acts of magic and faith. Priests anointed the body with frankincense, cedar, and myrrh, and wrapped it in linen inscribed with spells of protection. Offerings of lotus flowers, bread, beer, and milk were placed near the tomb, sustenance for the journey. The living spoke the opening of the mouth ritual, restoring speech and breath to the departed, so the soul could declare before the gods, "I have not stolen, I have not slain, I have not caused pain to the innocent." It was the ancient world's purest creed, the promise of a heart made light. The eternal cycle. For the Egyptians, Samhain's spirit was present in every sunrise. As the sun god Ra sailed nightly through the underworld, he too faced death, and at dawn was reborn. Thus, every soul, by courage and truth, might rise with him. When the scales are even, the heart becomes the morning star. When the breath returns, the light is everlasting. And so they believed that to live justly was to die beautifully, and to die beautifully was to awaken again. The harvest of shadows, Samhain in the modern witch's path. Beneath a waning moon, the air tastes of smoke and endings. The fields are bare, yet the heart burns bright. The wheel turns again. Every turning of the year brings us to this threshold, Samhain, when the veil thins, the dead draw near and the living remember. Though centuries and empires have passed, the pulse of this night endures. The Celts called it Samhain, the Norse their Helblót, the Romans Lemuria, the Greeks their descent, and the Egyptians their passage. And in each the same truth glows. Death is not the opposite of life, but its hidden root. The witch's fire. In the modern witch's path, Samhain is both ending and renewal, the New Year's Eve of the soul. We light candles in pumpkins or lanterns, echoing the hilltop fires of Tlashtka and Tara. We honour the ancestors not in fear, but in gratitude for every scar they carried, every hope they handed down. The fire we kindle tonight is not to ward off spirits, but to invite them home. It is a hearthlight, a beacon for memory, courage and return. The altar of remembering, each witch's altar becomes a small crossroads between worlds. Upon it may rest a photograph of the departed, a cup of wine or cider for the ancestors, a black candle for endings, a white candle for light returning, herbs of the season, mugwort, sage and rosemary to cleanse and open the way. The ritual is simple. Light the flame, speak the names, listen. Let silence stretch and you may feel the gentle stir, not haunting, but homecoming. The shadow and the seed. Samhain is a mirror. It asks us to gaze not outward but inward, to meet our shadows, to grieve what must be released, to forgive what was broken. The witch's wisdom is not denial of death, but companionship with it. For every spell of harvest is also a spell of burial. Every seed sleeps in darkness before it flowers again. Tonight we plant our inner seeds in that same dark, trusting they will rise when the light returns. The modern rite. When your ritual fire fades, sit in its glow a moment longer. Whisper to those unseen. You are remembered, you are loved. Walk with me in silence. Then breathe deeply and let the quiet settle like soft ash. You have honoured the dead, but you have also honoured yourself, the living vessel of all who came before. The circle unbroken. The ancients knew what we too must remember, that the veil is not a wall, only a curtain gently swaying. Every flame, every offering, every whispered name keeps the circle turning. The eternal conversation between shadow and light. The harvest is ended, but the heart still burns. Death walks beside us, and so does love.